1949.
But don't think that decision to recognize Israel is an easy one. I had to make a compromise with the Arabs and divide Palestine. The Jews wanted to chase all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the Arabs wanted to chase all the Jews into the Red Sea. And what I was trying to do was to find a homeland for the Jews and still be just with the Arabs. But when you go into a thing of that kind, the people you help most are the ones that get most angry with you. Both of them were against me on the situation, but as President of the United States, I paid no attention to them, carried out what I thought was right, and I had the support of the Congress, and I could do it, which is unusual in these days.
Could you tell us specifically that a lot of Jewish people were against you, too?
Oh, well, there were a lot of Jewish people against me because they wanted the whole of Palestine. As I say, they wanted to drive all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
What's up, family? This is your man, not your boy, bringing you another gold nugget that you can either pick up or you can just kick it aside. You know, Harry S. Truman, the 33rd president of the United States from 1945 to 1953, the president to influence and recognize Israel as a state. Now, I want you all to understand that during this time that we have Israel against Palestine, many people don't understand how this whole thing, the scheme of Israel becoming a state works. But I'm not going to get into that. What I'm going to get into is he supported, and he also wind up trying to convince others to make a Jewish state for Israel. But he had said some very anti-Semitic tropes and comments about Jewish people that I and other people have found very interesting. Now, before we get into that, let's just imagine you became president after a World War II. It just ended in 45 when he took president. And we know that Israel became a state in 1948. But this World War II that was happening or just ended was against Germany, Italy, and Japan were fighting really for their expansion. And America, Britain, and Russia was trying to cause that not to happen. Well, we all know what the results were. Germany failed, and the Allies won. The Axis team, they lost. And now we moved into an area because of the Germans had this Holocaust. Some of the countries believe they should become or have their own state. You know, now, these statements he made, people say they were outlandish, anti-Semitic, and I'm going to get into that. But first, black folks are going to say, well, did he ever do anything for black people? Well, in his history, I guess to his acclaim during his presidency, 2-year terms, he was a president who tried to establish an anti-lynching legislation. Truman repeatedly called for Congress to pass legislation specifically targeting lynching, which was a horrific form of racial terror against African Americans. Despite his efforts, he was unable to secure the passage of federal anti-lynching laws due to strong opposition in Congress. Now, listen to this. That was in the 40s. Do you know they just passed the lynching law in 2022? I think it was May the 20th or something, in 2022 last year. They just passed the lynching law. This congressmen and women did not see it fit to have anything for a black people. Removing the prejudices and, the hate crimes and all this there. It took until 2022 for them to pass this bill that President Truman brought into place to try to get an executive order or a bill passed. The second accomplishment he did for black people was civil rights, a commission. In 46, Truman established the President Committee on Civil Rights, also known as the Truman Commission, through Executive Order 9808. This commission investigated racial discrimination and recommended federal actions in areas such as voting rights, education, and employment. He also brought in Executive Order to desegregate the armed forces. Truman signed Executive Order 9981 in 1948, which directed the desegregation of the armed forces. This order aimed to end racial desegregation within the military and provided equal opportunity for African American soldiers. He also brought in the fair employment practices. He established a presidential committee on civil rights. All this housing reform, all these things that he brought back in the 40s trying to establish for African American people. Now, let's get to his anti-Semitic views and his words that he wrote in his diary back in 1948 or 47. The Washington Post reported back in July 2003 that the National Archives had released his diaries and his memoirs. And to their surprise, he, Harry S. Truman, made comments about the Jewish people back in his day. But the most surprising comments were Truman's remarks on Jews, written on July the 21st of 1947. After the president had a conversation with Henry Morgenthau, the Jewish former Treasury Secretary, Morgenthau called the talks about a Jewish ship in Palestine, possibly the Exodus, the legendary ship carrying 4,500 Jew refugees who were refused entry into Palestine by the British. Then rulers of that land, he quoted saying he had no business, referring to Mr. Morgenthau, he had no business whatsoever to call me. Truman wrote, the Jews have no sense of proportions, nor do they have any judgment on world affairs. Henry brought 1,000 Jews to New York on a supposedly temporary basis, and they stayed. Truman then went into a rant about the Jews, quoting, the Jews I find are very, very selfish. They care nothing about how many Estonians, Latvians, Finns, Poles, Yugoslavs, or Greeks get murdered or mistreated as displaced persons as long as the Jews get special treatment. Yet when they have power, physical, financial, or political, neither Hitler nor Stalin has anything on them for cruelty or mistreatment to the underdog. I didn't say that. Truman said that. He further said, put an underdog on top and it makes no difference whether his name is Russian, Jewish, Negro, management, labor, Mormon, Baptist. He goes haywire. I've found very, very few who remember their past conditions when prosperity comes. Let me make clear, and as a disclaimer, not in generality we can say all Jews are alike. You have the Zionists, you have the anti-Zionists, you got those who live in a total different life, you got those in other different countries who claim to follow Judaism, that they may behave and think and operate differently. But what Truman said of what Hitler had said about the Jews, this opinion, this view about those people back in his days, is there something more to than what we know when it comes to the political aspects or the political arena? When these people who are pushing their ways through other means of trying to establish their presence in their state, in their country, and in other people's spaces, does it make sense now when you hear Truman say they don't care about other people, just as long as they have their own power? This is your man, not your boy, bringing you another gold nugget that you can either pick up or you can just kick it aside.